Some cases were never solved. Some calls were never traced.
In a small Montana town, parents pass down a very specific warning to their children. If you are walking at night and hear footsteps behind you, you do not look back. Jason Miller was 23, fresh out of college and back home for the summer. He viewed local folklore as exactly that, stories meant to keep kids from wandering off in the dark. On a freezing October night, Jason walked home from a friend's house. It was nearly midnight, and his route covered a 2-mile stretch of deserted pavement, completely void of open businesses, street traffic, or anywhere to duck inside. A person raised to trust logic expects the world to behave predictably. When a threat relies on weaponizing basic human curiosity, a rational mind is the least prepared to defend itself. Halfway home, the silence broke. A single crunch of a footstep echoed behind him. Jason stopped walking, turned around, and scanned the empty road. Hearing nothing else, he assumed it was a stray dog. Even when a second footstep crunched on the gravel moments later, he simply shook his head and kept walking toward his house. When Jason finally walked through his front door, his grandmother was awake in the kitchen. He casually mentioned the noises on the street. Her expression went blank, her grip loosened, and her teacup shattered against the hardwood floor. The legend's danger has nothing to do with what a person might see in the dark. The danger is that by turning around, you expose your face to whatever is following you. Turning around on that street finalized a connection. He had presented his identity to the dark, transitioning from a passerby into marked prey. At 3:13 a.m., Jason woke up. Directly outside his bedroom window, slow, heavy footsteps were crunching through the dead leaves. This diagram shows the cross-section of Jason's house. His bedroom was on the second floor. The window was 20 feet off the ground, with flush exterior walls. There was no balcony, no fire escape, and no ledge for a physical person to stand on. Yet the pacing continued right against the glass. Then came a whisper, calling his name. It was Jason's own voice, perfectly identical in pitch and cadence. His grandmother pulled him from the room and locked the door. She explained that her own father had heard the footsteps when he was 18, made the mistake of looking back, and was stalked by the noises for the rest of his life. The mimicry forces a psychological breach. By using Jason's own voice, the entity moves past simple haunting and begins to occupy the victim's own identity. The scratching at the second-story window stopped. Seconds later, the assault moved downstairs. 3 heavy knocks echoed from the front door. A muffled voice called out from the porch. It was Jason's mother, sounding panicked, begging her own mother to open the door and let her inside. Jason's mother did not live in town. As this map shows, she lived 3 states away, making it physically impossible for her to be standing on that porch at 3 in the morning. The phenomenon operates through assimilation. It observes its target, harvesting the voices of their relatives, their personal memories, and their familial connections. By using the desperate voice of a loved one, it bypasses logic and targets human empathy. The natural instinct to open a door and protect a family member becomes a fatal trap. The pleading from the porch abruptly stopped. The house fell completely silent. Then distinct footsteps began pacing inside the hallway, slowly climbing the interior staircase. The steps halted right outside Jason's bedroom. Fingernails dragged across the wood of the door, followed by the brass doorknob slowly turning, testing the lock. When the door wouldn't open, it delivered one final taunt. Jason's exact voice whispered through the wood, calling out to his grandmother in the dark. Interior locks and walls provide no sanctuary. Jason and his grandmother were now trapped in a space the entity could navigate as easily as the street outside. When the sun finally rose, Jason refused to stay. He packed his bags into his car and drove out of the town limits, desperate to find distance and a rational explanation for the night's events. He reasoned that whatever was happening was tied to the town itself. Local folklore, he assumed, must have local boundaries. For the first hour on the highway, the strategy seemed to work. In the daylight, the miles passed quietly, and the tension in his chest finally began to ease. Then he finally checked his rearview mirror. Sitting rigidly in the middle of his empty back seat was a dark, featureless silhouette with a distinct, wide smile. The pursuit is tethered to the individual rather than the location. Once the entity memorized his face, physical distance became irrelevant. Jason slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a halt. He spun around, but the back seat was empty. A second later, his phone rang. It was his grandmother. Before he could explain what he saw, her voice came through the speaker, terrified. She knew he had checked the mirror. She knew he had looked back again. Every time a victim looks over their shoulder, the entity gains ground. Each glance backwards permanently reduces the physical distance between the predator and the prey. The legend focuses on the eyes of the entity. Keeping one's back turned ensures the monster never gets the visual confirmation it needs to begin the hunt. Jason Miller is now locked into a lifelong pursuit. His survival depends on an impossible task, completely suppressing the human reflex to check behind him. And the moment his discipline fails, the distance will close for good.